Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
Vince Coglianese.
This issue of crime was one of the subjects that President Trump brought up in yet another long and extensive event and press conference today out in California. He was out at his, I believe it's a Trump National Golf Club out there in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. And President Trump, he went there, and he's there for a number of events, but he's campaigning in California and doing some fundraising, in fact, this weekend, raising a bunch of money for his campaign. The LA Times reports that he's in California this week for a pair of high-dollar fundraisers, including a Thursday night event that would have been last night, where tickets were going for $250,000 apiece. That's some big-ticket dinner plates. And he is scheduled to attend a Friday afternoon fundraiser in the Bay Area, hosted notably by relatives of Gavin Newsom's wife. That's right. Gavin Newsom's wife has relatives who are hosting a big fundraiser for Donald Trump. The cost, they say, is about $500,000 per couple. So that's a big haul. And so that brings President Trump out to California. He's campaigning in the state. Of course, not just doing the fundraising, but speaking there at his golf club out there on the West Coast, which overlooks the Pacific Ocean. It's beautiful. That area is going through a lot of rough times, though, right now, because right near his golf club, there are portions that are landslides going on that are absorbing some of the earth there, as the ocean does in California, and it's affecting people who live very near the coastline. So a lot of concern in that area. President Trump brought it up very, very early. In fact, first thing as he was standing there and addressing the nation today from California. He had a lot to say, though. In his remarks, he used, I thought it was kind of a good phrase, he was referring to not just the natural destruction that's taking place as we're speaking there, but also the man-made, or as he put it, woman-made destruction of places like California.
But what they've done, Gavin Newsom and Kamala, I'd almost say Kamala more so, she destroyed San Francisco and she destroyed the state. When you look at the kind of destruction that's taken place, it's all man-made or woman-made destruction, too. It's things that should have never happened, but we're not going to let that happen with 4 more years of her in the White House, because if you have what happened to this country as what they allowed to happen in California and San Francisco, one of the great cities of the world 15 years ago, and today it's not in a very good position, to put it mildly, in this state, which is probably the best piece of real estate in the world. The state, you have the sunshine, you have the ocean, you have everything. You have the perfect weather, the best weather. And they've hurt it so badly.
Yeah, they've hurt it so badly. California, isn't that a case study in the destruction the left has wrought in the country? It is just the saddest possible thing. It really is such a beautiful state. Southern California, just absolutely gorgeous. And the state and places like San Francisco have become overrun by squalor, and which has been aided and abetted by the Democrats who run the state. And it's just, I don't know how many stories we can tell you about what's happening there, from the lack of power to the idiotic environmental regulations to the failures. I mean, they talk about all this. They have droughts. They don't have the water they need. Well, they have a giant ocean next door, and all the desalination that they could be doing, they're not doing it. They're not clearing out the forestry, the fuel that leads to some of these gigantic fires. It's the most incompetently run state in the country, and it's such a beautiful state. But Democrats, they run it, and they're running it into the ground. And people are running away from California, moving out in droves. It's the reason why a U-Haul is so much more expensive going out of California than it is coming in, because there's a lot of competition for that. People want to get out of the state. What a disaster. People used to want to go to California. They wanted to go. They dreamed of a life where they could be in beautiful, sunny, wonderful California. Not so much anymore. Nancy Pelosi's from San Francisco. They have poop all over the sidewalks in that city. You have, thanks to modern technology, you can track where the poop is. They have apps to track where the poop is all over the city. It's grotesque. It's really disgusting. And, of course, then you've got the drug problems, you've got the homeless problems, and you have a state that's overrun by illegal aliens, a border state, California. And Democrats have allowed all that to happen. They've aided and abetted it. They call their cities sanctuary cities. We're not going to enforce laws here. So when you don't enforce laws, lawlessness takes over. It's a huge warning to the rest of us. And that's the political environment from which Kamala Harris came from. She came up in that political environment. She was out there, dating all the powerful people and using them to advance her career, whether it was Montel Williams or Willie Brown. That's the world she came up in. You see that video of Willie Brown recently that popped up, where there was somebody. It was an old ABC News package, and Kamala was asked was in the package, and she was asked, "Are you his daughter?" Meaning Willie Brown. And their age difference couldn't be more vast. I think they're 31 years apart, and she was dating Willie Brown at the time, and nobody really knew who she was. It looks like it's December of 1995. Listen to this audio, the way that Willie Brown is described. And Kamala Harris makes an appearance in this audio.
He's a rogue, all right, notorious for his flamboyant lifestyle. Flashy clothes, fancy parties, fine women.
Okay, so right there, fine women, the host says, fine women. Can you imagine any news outlet saying that now? There he is, Donald Trump, flashy cars, gold toilets, and fine women. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. But Willie Brown, though, 1995, I guess, this video put together, and there's Kamala Harris. She turns back towards the camera as a reporter says, or some woman at least says, "Are you his daughter?" And she looks back and kind of cringes a little bit and smiles and says, "No, I'm not. I'm not." And as the audio continues, the video continues here, you even see Kamala Harris waving on stage with Willie.
And fast cars.
You should from now on address me as the mayor.
If ever a man and a municipality were made for each other, it is this man, this place.
Yeah, and so there's Kamala right next to him, cheering him on. Big smiles, big smiles. And so this is the world that she comes from. She comes from corrupt California politics, and with all of the demented ideologies that come with it, that has wrecked that state, and in many ways wrecked a whole bunch of other states, especially states who've had to tether themselves to California's environmental policies, which have done nothing to help environments, but instead have caused a lot of suffering. And that's the world she's from. So there's President Trump today out there saying that this state has been wrecked by both man-made and woman-made destruction. Look at him being inclusive, talking about all of this. Among the many things he said about Kamala Harris today, though, were he mentioned, and I think that this is pretty important, that this border crisis that she's been responsible for advancing, seen in places like Aurora, Colorado, and Springfield, Ohio, and all over the place. In addition to just the crimes and the drugs and the deaths, one of the underappreciated features of all of this is, do you know how many children have come across our border and then have gone missing? A lot. A lot. In fact, listen to President Trump today describe what Kamala Harris is responsible for and just how many kids have come into our country and have now gone missing to God knows what fate.
Now, as vice president, she's facilitated the largest wave of sex trafficking and human trafficking in history, the history of our country by far. And in case you don't want to write about it, which you should, because there can be no bigger scandal than this, we have, under this administration, 325,000 migrant children are missing. 325,000. In other words, take your biggest stadium in California and you could fill it up 5 or 6 times. Those are all missing children. Many of them are dead. Many of them are sex slaves and slaves of different nature.
Have you noticed that President Trump and the Republicans are, specifically the Trump campaign, they're the campaign that talks about the well-being of kids? You notice that? And Kamala Harris's campaign is trying to prevent people from having children. They're like enthusiasts about abortion. And if they do have kids, they advance cruelties upon them. This idea that children are born in the wrong body. Their body's a mistake. You need to hide their so-called gender transition from their parents in the school systems. They need to see pornography inside the classrooms. Meanwhile, what is President Trump saying? He's talking about the well-being of American kids. He's talking about the well-being of foreign children who are coming across our border and then disappearing into our country. As he said, many of them dead, many of them sex slaves of a different nature, he says. That, by the way, that's consistent with some reporting we've seen in legacy media, which shows that quite a few children have come in and end up working in sweatshops in the United States as indentured servants to the cartels. They have to pay off debts to the cartels using child labor in the United States. That's actually happening. And President Trump's campaign also advancing basic principles around healthy diets and healthy lifestyles for kids. That's the big thing that RFK Jr. is bringing to the campaign. In addition to being a Democrat or a lifelong Democrat who's now an independent endorsing President Trump, his focus area is health. Make America healthy again has been his rallying cry. And he's talking about tackling chronic diseases and bringing about health for kids. That's his life's work. That's what he wants to see happen. And that's what President Trump wants, obviously. That's why he brought RFK on board. So that's what the Republicans are. That's what the Trump campaign is talking about. Radically different than the Kamala Harris campaign, which is for all sorts of demented radicalism. And on this question of how many foreign children are now missing in the United States, Jenny Terre, good friend, old colleague of mine at the New York Post, she wrote recently for the New York Post the following. She said, the Biden-Harris administration has lost track of 320,000 migrant children who crossed the border without parents, according to a shocking new report. Untold numbers of children who were released into the U.S. to, quote, qualified sponsors are now at risk of sex trafficking, forced labor, and other forms of exploitation, a Homeland Security Inspector General's report released Monday said. As of May of 2024, there are 291,000 migrant children who arrived in the U.S. as unaccompanied minors who were set free and never given a date to appear in immigration court, meaning there is no way to track their whereabouts. That is in addition to the 32,000 children that Immigration and Customs Enforcement authorities released into the U.S. with hearing dates but then failed to show in court, according to the 14-page report, which tracked a period from October of 2018 to September of 2023. One federal whistleblower said that she believes many of these vulnerable kids could already be in the hands of criminals and sex traffickers. So there you go. So that report, these reports come from within the government. One of the reasons I'm emphasizing the actual report on the subject, though, is as usual, have you noticed that when President Trump asserts something, especially when he just says like a data point like that, when he says 325,000 migrant children are missing, and then he describes many of them as dead or sex slaves or slaves of a different nature, that's the kind of thing that the media instantly mocks. Where is he getting this from? He's making this up. They'll just assert flatly that he's just pulling stuff out of his rear and just saying it into a microphone. When, in fact, once again, Trump is right on this subject. And the Biden-Harris administration has admitted that in a muted way. It takes places like the New York Post to pull out the details and cover them with aggression so that more people know about it. And there's President Trump talking about it today. Big event. I love him. I love him being in California, Republican candidate, in these final 2 months out there in California campaigning. Cool to see. Your calls and a lot more ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. It's 3:22 now. WMAL traffic and weather. Ed Rodriguez is in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
I've been working in California for many years in Silicon Valley, back when we had a President Reagan. And I just wanted to caution everybody about California, about what's going on there. It does flow through to the rest of the country. California is the biggest economy, one of the biggest economies in the world. So agriculture, technology, everything that costs more in California eventually flows through the supply chain to everybody else.
Yes.
California's experiencing brownouts, blackouts. They only have one remaining nuclear power plant that Gavin Newsom wants to shut down, Diablo Canyon. So what's going to happen when all the trucks and the diesel trucks and cars that aren't allowed to go in and out of California, what's going to happen for the 2028 Olympics? I was just out there last month, paid $5 for a gallon of gas. So we've got to be careful about what happens in California because it really does affect the rest of the country.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Joining us now from the great state of Pennsylvania, an Army combat veteran, Congressman Scott Perry joins us. Sir, good to have you with us on the program.
Great to be with you, Vince. Exciting times as we grind to inevitability on November 5th, right?
I know. How are you feeling? If you when you woke up this morning and you thought about the election, what did you think to yourself?
Well, what I really think is that I don't understand how this is even a contest, quite honestly. I mean, President Trump is accused of being a threat to democracy. Meanwhile, the Democrat Party disavowed every single vote of its party members and installed somebody in a coup that has received no votes and then has, in 2 months or so, transformed an incompetent boob into a person that now resembles the cross-section of Margaret Thatcher, Oprah Winfrey, Taylor Swift, and Betty Crocker. And so, but look, it's always an uphill battle for people that follow the truth because the mainstream media, they're not interested in that. What they're interested in is supporting their cause and their ideology and their narrative. And Kamala Harris, of course, as a Marxist, best represents that. And so we not only have to overcome whatever other shortcomings we might have as individuals and as a party, we must overcome all of that chicanery. And yet somehow, on occasion in America, we do that, and we sure are praying that this is one of those times.
It does feel like Republicans, Trump supporters, are as energized as I've ever seen them now. And I'm hopeful that bodes well for the election. But you're right. I mean, when it comes to the Democrats and the media outlets who support them, the lying has never been more brazen, has it? I mean, they're lying like right to your face about things that you know, and yet they'll tell you you'll lie anyway.
That's exactly right. They absolutely are. I mean, Kamala Harris is attempting to run as the consummate outsider. Meanwhile, she's been in office for the balance of this 4 years, has presided over the destruction of the country and the pain and suffering that all of her constituents across the country are feeling, yet she somehow is trying to have you believe that she is the outsider who is going to solve all these problems and at the same time providing not one solution at all that's tangible and blaming everything on the guy that hasn't been in office for 4 years. Yeah. And yet the media, of course, as we all watched, has no reservation about not questioning any of that. And the lies are breathtaking. They are breathtaking. Right down to the fact that they just disavow the fact that they didn't even visit or call the families of 13 dead service members. I mean, the most notoriety they gave to him was when the president looked at his watch at the reception of their caskets because the proceedings were taking too long. I mean, you couldn't really make this stuff. If this were a novel, you'd read it and shake your head and say, "Okay, this is a bit far-fetched." This is our reality.
It's too unbelievable. Yeah. For instance, earlier this week at that ridiculous televised event between President Trump, Kamala Harris, and those two supposed debate moderators who really were just, serving the Kamala Harris campaign as loyally as they could. Right. At that event, the only person who brought up a president of the United States, a Secret Service protectee being shot in the head in your state, Congressman Perry, was President Trump. Right. President Trump brought it up
himself.
Yeah. He brought it up and he goes, maybe constantly saying that I'm a threat to democracy may have led to somebody shooting me in the head. He brought that up. And not a single person on that stage batted an eye. Okay, we have to move on. That was the attitude. Can you believe that? That was July 13th that happened.
Exactly, and they brushed it aside as it didn't happen. And I guarantee you, had it been Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or any other prominent Democrat that had suffered the same fate under anybody, but especially under somebody with a MAGA hat on, that would have been the end of the coronation, and the rest of us, for even mentioning our nominee's name, would probably be trooped off to jail, right?
Yes, 100%. In fact, I was stupid enough to think at that moment, I was like, oh, the election's completely over. That guy's going to win. I mean, and great. I'm glad he's going to win. But, like, how could you possibly see that and then, vote against him? And the left, they just decided we're just going to memory hole it. So today is September 13th. That means that it's 2 months ago today that occurred. And it is forgotten to history. It may as well have been Reagan being shot that long ago because nobody cares about it.
That's exactly right. It may as well be Reagan being shot. And look, I'm not going to compare the two because obviously President Kennedy lost his life. But let's face it, we can't even know all these years later anything about the Kennedy assassination. We're not even allowed to know at this time. And yet people talk about it every single day. People are still Democrats in the so-called Democrat Party that doesn't even exist anymore solely because President Kennedy was assassinated. And like I said, I'm not trying to compare the two by contrast of how horrific they are, but they literally tried to assassinate the former president of the United States and the leading candidate for presidency of the United States, and he has to bring it up because they don't bring it up. Yet what happened 3.5 years ago on January 6th is the main topic of consideration for the moderators and his opponent.
Well, this gets to a really important fundamental point, and all Democrats and unfortunately some Republicans have a view of the American people that is a low regard. Unfortunately, it's a view of contempt. And on the JFK assassination, for instance, the reigning posture in Washington is the American people can't handle the truth. We're not going to tell them the truth. We're not going to tell them. So we're not going to release all of the things that we told them we were going to release a long time ago. And they don't do it. And we're seeing that again this week at places like Springfield, Ohio, where the media, they make a mockery of Donald Trump's concern about Springfield, Ohio being overwhelmed. But what he's really doing is channeling the voices of the people on the ground there who are saying, this is chaos for us. This is bad for us. And the media are crapping all over that and acting as if these residents don't have a legitimate grievance.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the Democrat Party and their communications division, the mainstream media en masse. Don't ask any questions. Your concerns are irrelevant to us. You're the rabble. We smart people, we the elites, we have the best answers. Here's what you do. You pay your taxes. You suck down the additional cost and your community being destroyed, and you shut your mouth. That's their answer to their constituency and to the American people in general. And it's in tandem. It is the so-called Democrat Party. And I say that, Vince, because it really doesn't exist as it did 40 years ago. They maintain that name because it's comfortable to people and it's familiar. But they're really socialists now. That's who's leading the party, and that's the policies of this party. But it's them and their communications division, the mainstream media, who can't be bothered to follow up on one story in Springfield, Ohio. You've got to send alternate media and internet bloggers to go out there to find out the truth because they can't be bothered because it doesn't fit what they want you to know.
I don't know if there's ever been a party more incorrectly named. I mean, I guess this happens in communist countries, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You know what I mean? It's like no, it's ridiculous because they call themselves the Democrats, yet at every opportunity they foreclose on actual democracy taking place. So they appoint their nominee. They try and kick Trump off the ballot. They try and arrest him. They arrest their political opponents. They go after Mark Houck with the Justice Department. They go after parents at school board meetings. I don't think they're interested in any divergent views.
Well, I've got a rule about that whole Democrat thing as a label. My assessment is every time it's used, you can assume the opposite, whether it's the American Democrat Party, the Democratic Republic of North Korea, the Democratic Republic of Congo. When you got to put it in the name, it's kind of like walking into the room and saying, I'm in charge here. If you have to say you're in charge, chances are you're not in charge.
Well, yeah, and it's perfectly Orwellian is what it is, and that's what these guys are up to. It's just crazy. Tell me what's happening in Congress, if you could, Congressman Scott Perry. We see some debate about whether or not there's going to be a spending bill that basically goes through a continuing resolution, we call it in Washington, and
right.
It continues all the way until March. Speaker Johnson, for a minute, was thinking about adding the SAVE Act to it and saying we're going to pass this in the House. But it looks like for now, those negotiations have collapsed. What's happening?
Well, we're still working on it. I think that there might be a different version of it, maybe taking the appropriations bills the House did pass and coupling them with a smaller version of the CR with the SAVE Act. Understand the Senate has completed none because they're not interested, because they don't care, because they want Chuck Schumer's handwritten omnibus done in the back room by his staff to fund all of federal government. They want that in December. So that's what their impetus is. But here's the thing, Vince. I mean, the Speaker is offering the Democrats he's offering them to spend as much money as they want to with the same misguided policies if they just will agree not to let people here illegally vote. And that's not good enough for them. They're saying, no, we've got to have all the money, all the policy, and we must have illegals here allowed to vote too. And so he gets no help from the other side of the aisle, and it's hard to do this math without that. But, that's the story that's not really being told. There's not one Democrat that's out there saying, you know what, people that are here illegally, it's against the law, and we're for law and order, and no one is above the law. So why don't we stand for the American people and allow them to decide the fate of their country, as opposed to all these people we imported into the country, 10 million or so, or maybe more, I don't know. But instead of letting them have a vote, why don't we just let the actual shareholders in this country have a vote and keep the foreigners, from Russia, the Communist Party of China, the Islamist countries that hate America, let's keep them from having a voice. They're not interested in that. And so, unfortunately, the Republicans just have to carry this weight all themselves.
That's true. But on this issue of linking the SAVE Act to the CR, I've heard some smart criticisms of this from people like Congressman Matt Rosendale and Thomas Massie really, really well this week attacked it and said, look, there's a couple things here. One of them is we know how this ends up. This is going to come back. It's going to be a clean CR with no SAVE Act attached to it. The media is never going to hold the Democrats to account that they're allowing illegals to register to vote in the United States. So it's not like they're going to have to wear the sin at all. And the other piece is that the SAVE Act wouldn't even really be in place for this election. So it's kind of a moot point. It's just going to extend all this awful spending. What do you make of that argument?
Well, look, I respect both. They're both good friends of mine. I've talked to them both today about working through this.
Sure.
So, I respect their position. Now, I would say this, sooner or later, because the Senate always gets this deal where it gets to demand this is what the House will do, right? Sooner or later, the House is going to say, we've had enough of this, and we're going to send this to you, and we're going home. And this is what you're going to do. Now, Vince, I don't know if it's this year. The SAVE Act as written is enforceable immediately upon passage. Immediately upon passage, states would be required to verify citizenship. And I'm hoping that this is the year that the Republican Party says, you know what, we're willing to fight for this. We're willing to show the American people that we're going to stand with them and not the people that are here illegally. And we're going to dare the Senate to stand with the people that are here illegally and just say, look, it's not worth funding the government if we can't allow illegals to vote. I don't know if this is the time or not. I don't know if this is the year or not. But unless, look, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that's why I think we need to take a shot.
Yeah, well, if Republicans fight for something, that's progress. I'll be happy with that. We need to get some victories on the board. Hey, Scott Perry, Congressman from Pennsylvania, Army combat veteran, great American. Thank you, sir. Really nice to talk to you today.
Thank you, Vince. God bless you and your audience.
Yes, sir. All right, there he is, Congressman Scott Perry, on some of the big issues of the day. I want to take a phone call. I've got Teresa calling in from Olney, Maryland right now on line 4. Teresa, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Teresa.
Hey, so thank you for taking my call again.
Yes, ma'am.
And I have a similar topic. So John Legend has gone on his Twitter account and is pontificating to the Springfield, Ohio residents, telling them that they should accept these Haitians and basically deal with it, that they're there now, and that he's telling them to be more Christian, more Christ-like in accepting them. And he said that they need to basically change their dietary preferences in order to make them feel more at home.
So John Legend, let me play some audio here. I have John Legend. This is John Legend. I guess he posted this to Instagram this week.
We had about 15,000 or so immigrants move to my town of 60,000. Now, you might say, wow, that's a lot of people for a town that only had 60,000 before. That's a 25% increase. That is correct. So you might imagine there are some challenges with, integrating a new population, new language, new culture, new dietary preferences, all kinds of reasons why there might be growing pains.
Dietary preferences. That's a funny euphemism. So you say in this video, he said that everyone just needs to suck it up. Like, this is fine.
Yeah, suck it up and be more like Christ and accept them.
More like Christ. Now, does he live in Springfield anymore, Teresa, to your knowledge?
I don't think so. I think his house is really big. He should probably, him and actually Taylor Swift could probably take them all in.
Yes. So he doesn't live in Springfield, Ohio. This is interesting. So I just looked up his net worth. He's worth, and net worth estimates are ridiculous mostly, but they say he's worth somewhere between $50 and $100 million. Believable. So he's and by the looks of it, in the video that he recorded, he's sitting in one of those bathrobes. It's a personal bathrobe. It's the kind of one that if you've ever gone to a fancy hotel, it's like hanging in the closet and you never put it on because you're like, who wears the bathrobe in the hotel? He has his own. He's wearing a bathrobe, and he's sitting in front of fancy artwork inside of his fancy house in his fancy chair, telling everyone that Springfield, Ohio is going to be just fine with 20,000 new people being dropped on it, and stop being a bigot for being concerned.
There's a young woman that has also been talking to a reporter. There's independent reporters who are actually doing a great job down there, and she's a homeless mom, young mom. She doesn't look any more than 25, 27 years old. And her little girl is with her, and she's talking to him saying that, I am homeless. I do get, I have in many times gotten things from the homeless shelter, but they are not giving them to us anymore. I don't know what to do. She's like, went on for a good 10 minutes talking to him, how this is not the way to bring in people. And I just felt so sorry for her because she's literally speaking for her entire area.
I love how all these guys are constantly telling us what the Christian thing to do is. I can tell you what the Christian thing is not to do, which is to abuse your own family members and abuse your own community and to hurt them. That's not the Christian thing to do. I know that much. Teresa, thank you. I appreciate the call and the heads up on John Legend. Great voice, broken brain. 3:53 now.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.